She thought kindness had ruined her life. He thought wealth had stolen his. When their worlds collided in a single act of compassion, one lost everything, while the other found the one thing money could never buy: love. The city never slept, but for Emily Carter it always felt cold. Every morning she walked the same cracked pavement to the small cafe tucked between a laundry shop and a pawn store. It wasn't glamorous work, serving coffee, scrubbing tables, surviving on minimum wage, but it was honest, and it helped her keep the lights on in the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her younger brother, Ethan. That morning, Emily's shoes pinched her feet, and the cafe manager's voice already echoed in her head, "Smile more, Emily. Customers don't pay for frowns." Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She wasn't one to complain. But under that practiced composure, she carried exhaustion like a second skin. Her brother's school fees were overdue, her landlord had given her a warning, and her mother's medical bills from back home still haunted her phone inbox. She never said it aloud, but sometimes Emily wondered if life punished kindness. She was always the one staying late for coworkers, always the one lending money she didn't have, always the one who gave even when she had nothing. Across the city, in a penthouse that could swallow her entire street, sat Daniel Hayes. To the world he was invisible, a man in plain clothes, a cap pulled low, and a worn backpack slung across his shoulder. But in reality, Daniel Hayes was one of the wealthiest men in America, heir to a multi-billion-dollar construction empire. Yet, the world of wealth had grown poisonous to him. Every handshake came with hidden contracts, every smile hid ulterior motives. Women flocked to him not for who he was, but for what he could provide. He was tired of it. That was why, for the past 6 months, he had lived in disguise, trading tailored suits for thrifted shirts, chauffeured cars for public buses. He wanted to see the world raw, unfiltered, without the shadow of his fortune. But loneliness clung to him more tightly than ever. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. That morning, Emily's cafe was unusually busy. A storm had driven more people indoors, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. She rushed between tables, her tray rattling with cups of steaming coffee. That was when she noticed him. He sat at the corner, rain dripping from his jacket, his shoes scuffed, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to count coins on the table. Something about him tugged at her heart. His eyes held a quiet weariness, the kind that mirrored her own. When she walked over, he looked up, almost embarrassed. I'll just take plain bread and tea," he murmured, sliding the coins forward. Emily glanced down. The money wasn't enough, not even for the cheapest item on the menu. She hesitated, hearing her manager's voice in her head, "Don't serve anyone who can't pay. We're not a charity." But her heart rebelled. With a gentle smile, she said, "I'll see what I can do." Moments later, she placed before him a full plate, eggs, bread, and hot tea. She whispered, "Eat. Don't worry about the bill." His eyes widened, confusion mixing with gratitude. "But, you'll get in trouble." She shrugged, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes, people just need help. Don't refuse it." For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something stir inside him, hope. At the other end of the cafe, Emily's manager, Mr. Green, noticed. His jaw tightened as he marched over, his voice sharp enough to slice through the room. "Emily, what is this nonsense? Giving food to beggars now?" She froze. "Sir, he needed it. I couldn't just." "Couldn't just?" He cut her off, his face dark with anger. "This is a business, not a charity. Do you think we can run on your pity?" The cafe went silent. Customers watched, whispers spreading. Emily's chest tightened with humiliation, but she stood her ground, even as fear knotted in her stomach. "He's human," she said quietly. "Hunger doesn't ask for permission." For a long moment, Green stared at her. Then with a sneer he spat, "Pack your things. You're finished here." The words struck her like a blow. She had just lost her only income. Daniel, sitting at the corner, felt his gut twist. She had sacrificed everything for him. That evening, Emily walked home under the drizzle, her tray of leftover worries heavier than ever. She didn't regret helping him, but fear gnawed at her. How would she tell Ethan? How would she pay rent? Yet, beneath the storm in her heart, there was a strange calmness too. She had chosen kindness. Even if the world punished her for it, she wouldn't regret that. Far behind her, in the shadows of the rain, Daniel followed quietly, guilt and admiration battling within him. For the first time in years, someone had seen him, not the billionaire, not the name but the man. And he knew, deep in his chest, that he could not let her sacrifice go unanswered. If you were in Emily's shoes, knowing helping him could cost you everything, would you still have done it? Comment below with what your heart would choose. The storm grew heavier that night. Rain streaked down the window of Emily's apartment, dripping into the potted plant she hadn't watered in weeks. Ethan sat cross-legged on the couch, staring at her as she dropped her damp jacket over a chair. "You're late," he said. His voice carried the innocence of a 16-year-old, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had learned too soon that life wasn't easy. Emily forced a smile. The cafe was busy. But Ethan caught the falter in her voice. What happened? She hesitated. How could she tell him she had just lost her job? That the bills would keep stacking higher while their options grew thinner? She brushed a strand of wet hair from her face and sank onto the couch. "Nothing I can't handle," she whispered. "Go back to your homework." But Ethan didn't move. "Emily, if something's wrong, you have to tell me. We'll figure it out together." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, but she couldn't bring herself to add to his worries. He was already carrying too much for his age. Instead, she just reached over and pulled him into a hug. Across the street, parked in a rented car, Daniel watched the dim light flicker through Emily's window. He had followed her home, not out of intrusion, but because guilt weighed on him. He had never seen someone risk everything for a stranger before. Inside his chest, conflicting voices battled. "Tell her the truth. She deserves to know who you are." "No, not yet. She'll think you're trying to buy her gratitude. She'll see you as just another rich man trying to fix things with money." And so, Daniel remained silent, watching, waiting. But the seed of resolve had been planted. He couldn't walk away from her now. The next morning, Emily dressed carefully, even though she had nowhere to go. She folded her uniform, knowing she'd never wear it again. Her landlord's notice sat on the kitchen counter, and her phone buzzed with another reminder about her mother's unpaid hospital bill. She grabbed her worn handbag and stepped outside, hoping the fresh air would ease the weight on her chest. Instead, she found herself face to face with the stranger from yesterday. Daniel. He stood near the apartment gate, his cap pulled low, raindrops clinging to his jacket. When his eyes met hers, he straightened nervously, almost as if he hadn't expected her to actually see him. "You," Emily whispered, her voice low with shock. "You followed me?" Daniel raised his hands quickly. "Wait, I know how this looks. I wanted to thank you. For what you did yesterday." Emily crossed her arms, her guard instantly rising. "You don't need to thank me. Just, don't get me in more trouble." But Daniel shook his head. "You lost your job because of me. I can't just walk away." Her jaw tightened. It's not your fault. I made my choice. He studied her, searching her face for something beyond her words. She was strong, but the shadows under her eyes betrayed her struggle. Finally, he asked softly, "Then at least let me buy you breakfast. A real one." Emily almost laughed. "You couldn't even afford tea yesterday. Now you're offering breakfast." Daniel swallowed. For the first time in years, he was tempted to reveal the truth, that he could buy the entire building she lived in with one phone call. But instead he said, "I had some bad luck yesterday. Today's better." Something in his tone made her pause. Against her better judgment, she sighed. "Fine. Just coffee. Nothing fancy." The diner down the street was quieter than the cafe had been. They sat in a booth near the window, the smell of bacon sizzling in the background. Emily wrapped her hands around the warm cup of coffee, savoring the heat against her chilled fingers. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Do what?" "Give me food yesterday. You knew it could cost you." Emily's eyes dropped to the table. "Because I couldn't look at you and do nothing. I've been hungry before. I know what it feels like." Her voice cracked slightly at the edges, and Daniel's heart tightened. "You don't deserve what happened," he said gently. She forced a small smile. "Life doesn't really care what we deserve." Daniel leaned back, watching her. He wanted to reach across the table, to promise her that things would change, that she would never have to carry this weight alone again. But promises meant nothing if she thought he was just another rich man throwing money at her problems. So instead, he asked carefully, "What do you want most, Emily? If you could change one thing in your life right now." She looked up at him, startled by the rawness of the question. Her lips parted, but the words seemed too heavy to release. Finally, she whispered, "I just want a chance. A chance to breathe without worrying if the ground is going to disappear under me." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her she'd get that chance, that he would make sure of it. But instead, he nodded slowly, hiding the storm of emotion behind his steady gaze. When they left the diner, the air felt different. The storm had broken, and sunlight spilled across the wet pavement. Emily walked a little slower, as if for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel entirely invisible. Daniel walked beside her, careful not to push, careful not to reveal more than she was ready to hear. But in his chest, a quiet fire had been lit. He had found what he didn't know he was searching for, someone who saw him as a man, not a bank account. And he knew he wasn't going to let her slip away. Do you believe in helping strangers, even if it puts your own security at risk? Or is survival more important than compassion? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. For the next few days, Emily tried to keep her distance. She told herself she didn't have time for strangers, especially ones who brought trouble in their wake. She had bills to pay, a younger brother to protect, and a job to find before the rent deadline crushed her. Whatever that man Daniel wanted from her, she couldn't afford to let it distract her. But no matter how hard she tried, he lingered in her thoughts. The way his eyes softened when he listened. The way he had asked her what she wanted most, as though her dreams actually mattered. Still, she resisted. People always wanted something. And she had learned long ago that good men were usually too good to be true. Daniel, on the other hand, found himself drawn closer each day. He told himself he just wanted to help, that he owed her for the job she had lost. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about debt anymore. It was about her. And yet, fear gnawed at him. What if she discovered who he truly was? Would her compassion remain? Or would she join the countless others who saw him only as a walking vault? So he stayed in disguise, careful, cautious. A man with a backpack and thrift store jacket, blending into the background of her life. On Thursday afternoon, Emily walked out of a job interview, her shoulders slumped. Another rejection. "We'll be in touch," the manager had said, but she knew that tone. It meant "don't call us." As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she nearly collided with Daniel, who had been waiting near the corner. "Rough day?" he asked softly. Emily frowned. "Are you following me again?" He raised his hands. "No, well, not exactly. I knew you'd be here. Thought maybe you'd want company." She exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across her face. "Daniel, I don't need company. I need a job. I need money. I need a life that doesn't keep falling apart. And you," she stopped herself, biting back the words. His brows furrowed. "And me what?" She looked at him then, really looked. His clothes were simple, his pockets nearly empty, yet he carried himself with a quiet strength. And she hated herself for even thinking it, but part of her wondered if she was wasting her time talking to a man who had nothing to give. She shook her head. "Forget it. Just go home." Daniel stood there on the sidewalk, watching her walk away. A flicker of pain burned in his chest. He wanted to shout after her, to tell her she was wrong, that he wasn't who she thought, that he had more than enough to change both their lives. But pride held him back. If she accepted him, it couldn't be because of his wealth. And so, he let her go. For now. That evening, Emily sat on the edge of her bed while Ethan worked on homework at the kitchen table. The apartment smelled faintly of damp clothes, and the sound of distant sirens drifted in through the thin walls. Her brother glanced up. "You're quiet." Emily rubbed her temples. "Just tired." "Is it about that guy?" Her head snapped up. "What guy?" "The one who keeps showing up. The one with the backpack." Emily flushed. "Ethan, don't start. He's just someone I helped once. That's all." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a knowing smirk tugging at his lips. "You don't talk this much about just someone." Emily threw a pillow at him, laughing despite herself. But later, when the apartment was silent and Ethan had drifted off to sleep, her laughter faded. Was Daniel just someone? Or was he becoming something more? The thought scared her more than she cared to admit. Meanwhile, Daniel paced his penthouse that night. The disguise hung on a hook by the door, but he hadn't changed into his expensive suits. He didn't want them. Not tonight. Instead, he replayed Emily's words over and over. "I need a life that doesn't keep falling apart. And you." Her voice had cracked on that last word. She had almost said it, "And you can't give me that." He clenched his fists. If only she knew the truth. But telling her would ruin everything. So he resolved, silently, stubbornly, "I'll show her. I'll prove I can be more than a paycheck. I'll earn her trust without the weight of my name." The following day, fate intervened. Emily had gone downtown to apply at a bookstore, and as she crossed the street, a delivery truck swerved suddenly. Tires screeched. People shouted. Daniel, standing nearby, reacted without thinking. He lunged forward, pulling her out of the truck's path just in time. They stumbled onto the sidewalk, breathless, her hands clutching his arms, her heart hammering in her chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. She nodded shakily, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Their faces were inches apart, their breaths mingling. Emily whispered, "Why do you keep showing up? Who are you really?" Daniel's lips parted, the truth fighting its way up his throat. But he stopped himself. "Not yet." Instead he said quietly, "Maybe I'm just someone who can't walk away." Emily pulled back, her chest tight with a mix of fear and something else she didn't want to name. "I don't need a savior," she said. "I'm not trying to be one," Daniel replied gently. "I'm just trying to be here." She shook her head, frustrated, conflicted. Part of her wanted to let him in. The other part screamed to push him away before she got hurt. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She walked away again. But this time, her heart didn't feel lighter for it. When someone tries to step into your life during your hardest moments, do you push them away to protect yourself, or do you let them in? What would you do in Emily's place? The bookstore interview was a failure. The manager smiled politely, shook Emily's hand, and gave the same rehearsed line she had heard too many times: "We'll keep your resume on file." By the time she walked out, rain had started again, soaking through her thin jacket. Her phone buzzed with another reminder of overdue bills. Her chest felt tight, as if the walls of her life were collapsing inward. She didn't notice the tall figure waiting by the corner until he stepped forward. "Daniel." "Don't," she said immediately, shaking her head. "Not today." But his expression wasn't casual this time. His eyes were serious, almost urgent. "Emily, please. Just let me walk with you." She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. With a sigh she muttered, "Fine. But only because I don't have the energy to fight." They walked in silence, footsteps splashing against the wet sidewalk. For once, Daniel didn't try to fill the quiet. He simply matched her pace, steady and unintrusive, as though he knew she needed space. But space wasn't what fate had planned. Half a block from her apartment, a loud crash split the air. A transformer sparked, and suddenly, the street plunged into darkness. The storm had knocked out the power grid. Emily froze. "Oh no. Ethan." Her brother was alone in the apartment, and the building was notorious for its faulty wiring and shaky elevators. Panic surged through her. Without thinking, she broke into a run. Daniel chased after her, his longer strides catching up quickly. When they reached the building, the hallway was pitch black, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. "Ethan." Emily called, her voice trembling. "Emily?" came the faint reply from upstairs. Relief washed over her, but the staircase was shrouded in darkness. She gripped the railing, but her hands shook. "Let me go first," Daniel said firmly, stepping ahead of her. "No, she started, but he was already climbing. His steady presence guided her upward, one careful step at a time. When they reached the apartment, Ethan was standing in the doorway with a flashlight. He looked from Emily to Daniel, brows raised. "Who's this?" he asked bluntly. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel stepped forward instead, his voice calm. "Just a friend. Someone who wanted to make sure your sister got home safe." Ethan studied him, then smirked faintly. "She doesn't usually let strangers in." Emily shot her brother a glare. "Ethan." But Daniel only smiled, the warmth in his eyes making the room feel a little less cold despite the blackout. With the power out, they had no choice but to light a few candles and wait. The storm outside raged on, trapping them in the dim glow of flickering flames. Emily busied herself in the kitchen, heating canned soup over a small gas burner. She tried to ignore the fact that Daniel was sitting at her table, talking easily with Ethan as though he belonged there. "So you like basketball?" Daniel asked. Ethan's eyes lit up. "Yeah. I'm not great, but I'm trying for the school team." Daniel grinned. "I used to play a little. Maybe I could show you a few tricks sometime." Emily glanced over sharply. "He doesn't need distractions. School comes first." Daniel's gaze shifted to her, soft but steady. Discipline matters, sure. But sometimes kids need more than books to keep them going. Ethan grinned wider, clearly warming to him. See? Finally, someone who gets it. Emily rolled her eyes, but deep down, she felt a strange pull. It had been so long since Ethan had smiled like that. So long since anyone had lightened their heavy little world. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed, Emily and Daniel sat across from each other at the table. The candlelight flickered between them, painting shadows on their tired faces. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." Her chest tightened. "Why? You don't even know me." Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes, you meet someone who makes you want to stay. No matter how much they try to push you away." Emily looked down at her hands, struggling to breathe past the lump in her throat. No one had ever said something like that to her before. She whispered, "I don't need saving, Daniel." "I know," he said gently. "But maybe you don't have to carry everything alone either." The silence that followed was thick, charged with something unspoken. For the first time, Emily didn't immediately push him away. She let the words sit between them, warm as the candlelight, dangerous as the storm outside. Hours later, when the power finally flickered back on, Emily walked him to the door. He paused, his hand resting lightly on the frame. "Good night, Emily," he said softly. Her lips parted, but the words tangled on her tongue. Finally, she whispered back, "Good night, Daniel." When the door closed, she leaned against it, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just the storm, just the stress, just exhaustion. But in the back of her mind, she knew the truth. Something had shifted between them. And it scared her more than anything. The storm passed, but something inside Emily hadn't settled. She told herself Daniel's presence was temporary, just a fleeting kindness during a blackout. Yet, when she found him waiting outside the bakery 2 days later, hands in his pockets, expression tentative, her chest ached with something she didn't want to name. "Morning," he greeted softly. She should have ignored him. Should have walked past. But instead, she found herself stopping. "You're persistent." He gave a faint smile. "Or maybe I just believe you deserve more than what life keeps throwing at you." His words burrowed too deep, so she changed the subject. "Why do you care?" Daniel hesitated, eyes flicking away. "Because I know what it's like to be overlooked. To feel stuck in a life that doesn't match who you really are." Something in his voice made her pause. There was truth there, heavy and personal. For the first time, she realized, she didn't really know anything about him. That evening, he returned with 2 cups of coffee and a quiet offer, "Mind if I sit with you for a while?" Against her better judgment, she let him. They sat at her tiny kitchen table, the same one he'd eaten soup at during the blackout. Candlelight had been replaced with the harsh glow of a single ceiling bulb, but somehow, the atmosphere still felt fragile, intimate. Emily studied him over the rim of her mug. "So, tell me something real. No easy answers. No deflections." Daniel looked almost startled by the demand. He tapped the side of his cup, thinking. Finally, he said, "When I was a kid, people only saw what my family had. Money, name, expectation. They didn't see me. I was invisible in plain sight." Emily blinked. Invisible? With money? A faint, almost bitter laugh escaped him. "Money doesn't make people listen. It makes them assume. They see a wallet, not a person." Her chest tightened. She had no idea why, but the loneliness in his voice mirrored her own. After a beat, she pushed back. "And now? You still feel invisible." Daniel's gaze darkened. "Now I hide on purpose. Because it's easier than being judged for what I am before I even open my mouth." Emily frowned. His words didn't entirely make sense, but the raw pain behind them was undeniable. She felt a strange urge to reach across the table, to tell him she understood. But the memory of her own scars kept her still. Instead, she whispered, "You don't have to tell me everything. But don't feed me lies either." His eyes softened, something unspoken hanging heavy between them. As if sensing the moment was too close, Ethan wandered in, yawning. "You're here again?" he asked Daniel bluntly. Daniel chuckled. "Guess I am." Ethan eyed him curiously. "You gonna stick around long enough to help me with free throws, or was that just talk?" Emily started to scold, but Daniel leaned back, grinning. "You pick the time. I'll be there." True to his word, Daniel showed up at the schoolyard the next afternoon. Emily stood off to the side, arms crossed, pretending she wasn't watching, but every laugh from Ethan, every encouraging word from Daniel, chipped away at the wall she had built. And then she saw it. The look on Ethan's face. The ease in his body. Her brother hadn't had a father figure since theirs walked out, and suddenly, here was Daniel filling that void without even trying. Her heart clenched. This was dangerous. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Emily finally spoke the truth she'd buried for years. "My mom worked 3 jobs after my dad left. She ran herself into the ground, trying to keep us fed. I promised myself I'd protect Ethan, no matter what it cost me." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "That's why I lost my job, Daniel. Because I thought helping you mattered more than keeping my head down." Daniel's breath caught. His eyes shimmered, like her words had cracked something open inside him. Quietly, he murmured, "And you still think it wasn't worth it?" Emily swallowed hard. "I can't afford for things to be worth it. I need them to be safe, secure, predictable." Her words echoed in the silence. For once, Daniel didn't push back. He just looked at her, really looked, as if her truth was a mirror he'd been afraid to face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "My father never cared about who I wanted to be. Only about what I had to become. The heir. The name. The fortune. It never mattered what it did to me." Emily's heart thudded. The puzzle pieces clicked. His bitterness toward wealth, his need to hide, the way he moved through the world with a quiet ache. "Daniel," she whispered. "Who are you really?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. But in his silence, she felt the truth pressing at the edges. A secret too big to remain hidden forever. And for the first time, Emily wasn't sure if she was ready to hear it. Do you think people should reveal their painful pasts early in a relationship, or is it better to protect those truths until trust is stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments. The air between them had shifted since that night. Emily felt it in the way Daniel lingered near the bakery window some mornings, pretending he just happened to be passing by. She felt it in the way her heart jumped whenever she spotted him waiting on the corner, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, expression caught somewhere between hope and hesitation. For days, she told herself she wouldn't give in. She told herself boundaries were safer. But one evening, when Ethan burst into the apartment with a wide grin and announced, "Daniel's teaching me how to dribble better, I almost made the basket today." Emily's resistance cracked. Daniel wasn't just showing up for her. He was showing up for Ethan. And maybe, just maybe, for himself too. Saturday morning, Ethan begged her to come watch him practice. Reluctantly, Emily agreed. She stood at the edge of the schoolyard, arms folded, pretending not to care. But when she saw Ethan laughing as Daniel tossed him the ball, when she saw the pure joy on her brother's face, her throat tightened. Daniel glanced at her across the court. Their eyes locked. For a moment, it felt like the whole world slowed. He smiled, small, genuine, unguarded. And to her horror, she found herself smiling back. Later, when Ethan ran off to grab water, Daniel walked over, slightly breathless. "He's good," Daniel said, his grin boyish. Emily snorted. "He's clumsy." "Clumsy now," Daniel countered, still catching his breath. "But he's got drive. That matters more than talent." Something in the way he said it, like he was talking about himself too, softened her. She shook her head. "Why do you care so much? About him? About us?" Daniel's gaze lingered on her face. "Because maybe I've spent too long caring about the wrong things. And this," he gestured to her, to Ethan, to the cracked basketball court under the fading sun, "feels like something real." Emily's chest squeezed. She wanted to push the words away, to dismiss them, but the look in his eyes made it impossible. That night, Ethan convinced Daniel to stay for dinner. Emily made pasta, embarrassed at how little she could offer, but Daniel ate like it was the finest meal in the world. "This is incredible," he said with a grin, twirling spaghetti around his fork. Emily rolled her eyes. "It's just noodles and canned sauce." "Maybe," Daniel replied softly. "But it tastes like home." The words stilled her. She caught the flicker of sadness in his eyes, the ache of someone who hadn't had a real home in a long time. And something inside her shifted. After Ethan went to bed, Emily found herself on the balcony, the city lights stretching out below like a sea of stars. Daniel stepped out a few minutes later, a blanket draped around his shoulders. "You're quiet tonight," he said. She shrugged, hugging herself against the cool breeze. "I'm just not used to this. To someone being here. Staying." Daniel leaned against the railing beside her. "Maybe I'm not used to it either." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the city below filled the silence. Then, without looking at her, Daniel asked, "Do you ever think about what you'd do if you didn't have to worry about money, or Ethan, or everything?" Emily gave a sad laugh. "All the time. But dreaming feels dangerous when reality is this heavy." "Tell me anyway," he pressed gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "I'd open a little cafe. Somewhere warm, with books on the shelves and music playing. A place where people could just breathe." Daniel's face softened. "That sounds perfect." Her throat tightened. "What about you? What would you do?" Daniel was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I'd stop pretending to be someone I'm not." The vulnerability in his words cracked something open in her. She turned, meeting his eyes. The distance between them felt fragile, charged. Slowly, without overthinking, she reached for his hand. His fingers curled around hers instantly, warm and steady. And for the first time in years, Emily let herself lean into someone else's strength. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm Emily hadn't known she needed. Morning coffee runs with Daniel. Afternoons at the court with Ethan. Evenings cooking together, laughter spilling into a home that had been quiet for too long. There was lightness now, woven into the heavy fabric of her days. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe she wasn't carrying the world alone. And yet, in the back of her mind, one truth lingered. She didn't really know Daniel. Not fully. Not yet. And when that truth surfaced, she feared it would undo everything. The closeness had become dangerous. Emily felt it in the quiet moments, in the way her chest tightened when Daniel brushed past her in the kitchen, in the way her pulse leapt when his laugh echoed through her small apartment. She told herself not to fall, not to hope. But hearts don't obey warnings. And then the truth came crashing in. It was a Thursday afternoon when Emily stopped by the corner store. She had left Ethan at the court with Daniel, promising she'd be back in 20 minutes. But as she waited in line, the TV above the register caught her eye. The news anchor's voice rang out, "Local billionaire Daniel Whitmore spotted again in the city, despite efforts to keep a low profile. Known for rejecting his family's empire, Whitmore has been seen frequenting working-class neighborhoods. Emily froze. Her blood ran cold. The screen flashed a photo him. Daniel. Her Daniel. Except not her Daniel at all. Her stomach flipped. The man who sat at her table, who laughed with Ethan, who listened to her dreams by candlelight, was a Whitmore. One of them. Money. Fortune. Privilege. The exact world that had crushed her mother, that had stolen her father, that had left her scraping at the bottom while men like him lived above it all. He had lied. Every smile. Every word. Every quiet night on her balcony. Her hands shook as she dropped her groceries and ran out the door. By the time she reached the court, Ethan was laughing, Daniel standing behind him, correcting his shooting stance. It was too normal, too warm. And it made her angrier. Emily. Daniel called when he noticed her. His grin faltered at the look on her face. She walked straight up to him, her voice sharp as glass. "Who are you?" He blinked, taken aback. "What?" Her chest heaved. "Don't play dumb. Daniel Whitmore. Ring a bell." Ethan froze, glancing between them, confused. Daniel's face paled. His lips parted, but no words came. "That's what I thought," Emily spat. "You lied to me. To us." "Emily, wait." "No." Her voice cracked, raw with betrayal. "You sat at my table, listened to my life, let me believe you understood what it meant to struggle. And the whole time, you were hiding this." Daniel stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I wasn't hiding it to hurt you. I wanted to be seen as me. Not as a name. Not as money." But Emily's chest burned too hot, her heart too raw. "You don't get it. People like you never do. You don't know what it's like to watch your mom break her back, just to put food on the table. You don't know what it's like to lose everything because someone with money decided you didn't matter. You lied, Daniel. And I can't," her voice broke, "I can't trust you." Ethan's small voice cut through the air. "Emily, stop." But she couldn't stop. The hurt spilled out like a wound torn open. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't come back." Daniel's jaw clenched, pain flickering across his face. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, might fight for her. But then his shoulders slumped. "All right," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "If that's what you want." He looked at Ethan once, sorrow heavy in his eyes, then turned and walked away. Emily stood frozen, fists clenched, tears burning hot. Ethan spun toward her, eyes wide and hurt. "Why did you do that? He was helping us." Her throat ached. "Because people like him don't stay, Ethan. They don't have to. And I can't let you get attached to someone who'll leave." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Maybe you're the one pushing him away." The words hit like a knife. Emily turned, her heart shattering, but she didn't let herself crumble until she was alone in her room. There in the silence, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Daniel's absence felt like a hole torn through her chest. And for the first time since she was a child, Emily admitted to herself, she was terrified. Not of being alone, but of the chance that she had just destroyed the only love that had ever truly seen her. The apartment felt hollow without Daniel's laughter drifting through it. Emily noticed it in the silence between her and Ethan, in the way the air seemed too heavy now, in the ache that filled her chest at the smallest reminders. A coffee cup he'd left behind, a forgotten basketball leaning against the wall. Days passed, but the wound inside her didn't close. Instead, it deepened. She replayed that moment at the court over and over, her voice sharp, his eyes wounded, Ethan's anger. Each time, she told herself she'd been right. That she had to protect her brother. That lies, no matter the reason, destroyed trust. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and she lay awake staring at the ceiling, another truth whispered through her heart. She missed him. Not the money, not the name. Him. The man who had taught Ethan to laugh again, who had looked at her as though she were more than her struggle, who had sat on her balcony and held her hand like it was something precious. And she hated herself for missing him. Across the city, Daniel sat in a penthouse that felt more like a gilded cage than a home. For years, he had run from his last name, choosing to live quietly, stripped of the Whitmore shadow. But Emily's words echoed in his head, cutting deeper than any rejection he'd faced before. You don't know what it's like. He had wanted to argue, to tell her about the loneliness of being smothered by wealth, about how suffocating it felt to be reduced to a dollar sign instead of a soul. But he hadn't. He had walked away, because for the first time in his life, he hadn't known how to bridge the gulf between his truth and hers. Now, staring out over the city lights, he realized something. He didn't want to walk away. He had spent years running from his family's empire, trying to become invisible. But Emily had seen him, not the money, not the name, but him. And he wasn't ready to lose that. The question was, did she want him back? At the bakery, Emily kneaded dough furiously, trying to drown her thoughts in work. Mrs. Harper, her older coworker, watched quietly for a while before finally speaking. You've been distracted, dear. More than usual. Emily pressed her lips together. I don't want to talk about it. Mrs. Harper gave her a knowing smile. When you find someone who makes your heart stir, you can't bake it away. Believe me, I've tried. Emily's hands stilled on the dough. Her throat tightened. What if he lied? Then ask yourself this, Mrs. Harper said gently. Did he lie to hurt you, or because he was afraid you wouldn't love him as he truly is? Emily froze. The question pierced through her anger, through her walls. Was Daniel's lie born of arrogance, or fear? That night, Emily found Ethan sitting by the window, the basketball Daniel had given him in his lap. His voice was small when he said, I liked him, Emily. I felt seen when he was around. You pushed him away, but I didn't want him gone. Her chest ached. She knelt beside her brother, resting a hand on his shoulder. I know. I'm sorry, Ethan. I was just scared. Scared of what? Ethan asked softly. Emily's eyes burned. Scared that if I let him in, he'd leave us too. And I can't survive watching you break again. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, But what if he's not like Dad? The words cut deep. What if he wasn't? Meanwhile, Daniel sat with his lawyer, half listening to discussions about the family business. Numbers, mergers, shares, it all blurred together. None of it mattered. For the first time in his life, he realized the only thing he wanted to fight for wasn't a company. It was a woman with tired eyes and a guarded heart, and the boy who deserved better than abandonment. And that meant making a choice. He could go back to hiding, to living quietly in the shadows of who he really was. Or, he could risk everything. His pride, his family name, his carefully built shield. For her. The next day, Emily found herself standing in front of the bakery mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked exhausted, haunted. Her hands trembled as she whispered aloud, Do I forgive him? Or do I let him go? The silence offered no answer. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She still loved him. And that terrified her more than anything. Both of them were now standing at the edge of a choice, pride or vulnerability, safety or love, distance or the terrifying, beautiful risk of letting their hearts collide again. and the decision would change everything. If you were in Emily's shoes, would you risk your heart again after betrayal, or protect yourself and walk away for good? Share your choice in the comments. The morning was bright, but Emily's heart was restless. She moved through the bakery like a shadow, her smile polite, her hand steady, but her soul caught between longing and fear. The words of Ethan and Mrs. Harper still lingered in her mind, like whispers she couldn't silence. When the bell above the bakery door chimed, she glanced up, and her breath caught. Daniel stood there, not in his worn hoodie and cap, but as himself, tailored suit, sharp lines, the quiet confidence of a man who no longer wanted to hide. Yet in his eyes, she saw the same softness, the same searching ache that had made her heart falter from the start. The bakery seemed to go still. Flour hung in the air like dust in sunlight, time pausing just for them. "Emily," he said, voice steady but vulnerable. "Can we talk?" Her hands clenched at her apron. "What could you possibly say that you haven't already hidden from me?" He stepped closer, but not too close. Respectful, cautious. "That I'm sorry. That I was a coward. That I should have trusted you with the truth from the start." She turned away, blinking hard. "You let me think you were just some drifter. Do you know what it cost me to help you? Do you know I lost my job, my only stability, for you?" His voice cracked. "I know. And I hate myself for letting that happen. I never wanted you to suffer because of me. I thought if I kept my name out of it, you'd see me for who I was, not the billionaire everyone else sees. But in protecting myself, I hurt the only person who made me feel human." Her breath trembled. She wanted to believe him, but trust was fragile now. "Why come back, Daniel? Why not disappear like everyone else has?" His eyes softened. "Because you're the only person I've ever wanted to fight for. I don't care about the business, the money, the name. I care about you and Ethan. If you'll let me, I want to be here, not as Daniel Whitmore, billionaire, but as Daniel, the man who fell in love with the bravest woman he's ever met." Her chest tightened. The honesty in his voice tugged at her walls, breaking them down piece by piece. Behind her, a small voice interrupted. "Emily." Ethan stood by the doorway to the kitchen, holding his basketball. His eyes darted from Emily to Daniel, nervous but hopeful. "Can we give him another chance?" Emily's throat closed. She looked at her brother, the boy who had already lost too much. Then she looked back at Daniel, the man who had risked coming back, unmasked, vulnerable. Tears stung her eyes. "Daniel, I don't know if I can promise it'll be easy." He stepped closer, his voice low and tender. "I don't want easy. I want real. I want you." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken emotion. Emily felt the weight of choice pressing on her, fear on one side, love on the other. And for the first time in years, she chose love. Slowly, she untied her apron, set it on the counter, and walked toward him. Her hands trembled as she reached up, brushing his cheek. "Then don't ever lie to me again." Relief flooded his eyes as he pulled her into his arms, holding her like he never wanted to let go. "Never again," he whispered into her hair. For the first time, Emily let herself lean into him, not fighting, not running. Just trusting. Weeks later, life began to shift. Daniel didn't sweep Emily away into mansions or boardrooms. He came to the bakery, rolling up his sleeves, laughing with Ethan, learning the rhythm of her world. And slowly, she began to believe that maybe this wasn't another dream doomed to break. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat on her balcony, the same place where walls had once stood between them. Ethan dribbled his basketball below while the city buzzed in the distance. Daniel took Emily's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You know," he said softly, I used to think wealth was a curse, that it made it impossible to know who cared about me for me. But then I met you, and you proved me wrong." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "And I used to think love was just another word for disappointment. But you're proving me wrong too." Daniel leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Then let's keep proving each other wrong." Their lips met, not with the urgency of desperation, but with the quiet certainty of two souls finally finding home. Love hadn't erased the struggles, but it had given them strength to face them together. Emily no longer carried the weight alone. Ethan no longer felt abandoned. And Daniel no longer hid behind a mask. In the end, compassion had cost Emily her job, but it had also given her something far greater: love that was real, raw, and worth every risk. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next.